The Meridian was the largest space station in the known galaxy. It floated in silent orbit above the remains of what had once been Earth. Now, Earth was nothing more than a broken sphere of rock and dust. Its oceans were gone. Its land was cracked and lifeless. The Orion conflicts had wiped it clean centuries ago. Humanity had scattered across the stars ever since. Inside the Meridian, hundreds of species gathered under the great silver dome of the Galactic Union Council. The dome stretched high above their heads. Its walls shimmered with energy fields that showed moving stars and distant galaxies. Long tables shaped like a ring circled the center platform, where speakers stood to address all members. Flags and symbols of different species lined the walls, each one claiming a seat at the council. The humans sat at the very edge of the chamber, far from the center. Their table was smaller than the others. No flag hung above them. It had been taken down a century ago when Earth fell. Since then, humanity had become little more than workers and servants, used for labor and cheap trade. The other species called them the broken race. They whispered that humans had no home, no pride, and no fight left in them. Captain Elias Ward sat at the head of the human table. He was a tall man with short black hair, starting to gray at the sides. His face was hard but calm, like stone carved by time. His dark eyes watched every movement in the chamber. He wore a plain gray uniform with no medals or rank, only the small silver star pinned over his heart, the last symbol of Earth's lost legacy. Elias had grown up hearing the stories of Earth's fall. His mother had told him about the blue oceans, green forests, and great cities that once stood. He had never seen them. He was born in the colonies, raised on ships and space stations. But the stories lived inside him like a quiet fire. He had spent his life trying to keep humanity safe through peace. He believed words could stop wars. He had always believed that. Until today, at the center platform, High Arbitrator Varek Kor stood tall and proud. He was a Zoran, a species known for their pale skin, long limbs, and sharp black eyes. Varek wore long golden robes that shimmered as he moved. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The Council has reviewed the matter of the human colonies," Varek announced, spreading his arms wide. "For too long, these scattered human settlements have existed without full Union control. They claim independence, yet they rely on Union protection. This cannot continue." The chamber murmured. Some delegates nodded. Others leaned forward, interested. Varek continued without looking at the human table. "From this day forward," Varek said loudly, "all human colonies must submit to direct Union authority. Their fleets will be disarmed. Their trade will be monitored. Their governments will answer to this council. In return, they will receive food and shelter under Union law. If they refuse, all trade and protection will be cut off." Elias felt his jaw tighten. He kept his hands folded on the table. He glanced to his left where his advisor, Nora Leong, sat. She leaned toward him and whispered, "They're going to starve us if we refuse," she said softly. Elias nodded once. He already knew. Varek turned at last to face the human table. His sharp black eyes locked on Elias. His thin lips curved into a small, cold smile. "We offer this gift out of mercy," Varek said. "Do not mistake it for weakness." The chamber grew silent. Elias stood slowly. He took a deep breath before he spoke. "For over 2 centuries," Elias said clearly, his voice steady, "humanity has honored every treaty. We have paid every price for peace. We have rebuilt our lives among the stars. Yet, you treat us as if we are nothing. You demand our surrender." Again, Varek's smile faded. The council waited. Elias let his words hang in the air for a moment. Then, without waiting for permission, he stepped down from the table and walked out of the chamber. The human delegation followed silently behind him. No one stopped them. No one cared to. As they left, the chamber filled with quiet laughter. Elias Ward walked through the long metal corridors of the Meridian without speaking. The footsteps of his delegation echoed behind him. The wide, polished halls were lined with security drones floating silently in the air. Cameras followed every move they made. No one trusted humans on this station. No one had for a long time. When they reached their private quarters, the heavy doors sealed behind them. Only then did the tension finally break. "They can't do this to us again," Nora Leong said, her voice sharp with anger. She stood by the window, staring out at the broken remains of Earth. "We've given them everything. We've bent our knees for 200 years. Elias sat down slowly at the round table in the center of the room. His face showed no emotion, but inside, his mind was already spinning. "They will take the colonies," said Marcus Hale, one of the younger delegates. His fists were clenched tight at his sides. "And after that, they'll take the rest. Our ships, our people, everything. We can't fight them," said Dr. Erin Vance, the chief diplomat. She sounded tired. "We have no fleet, no weapons. We have nothing left to fight with." Elias looked up at all of them. He let the silence settle before he spoke. "What if we do?" he asked quietly. The others stopped talking. All eyes turned to him. "We have more than they think," Elias said. "We've spent years preparing for something like this. Quietly, carefully, we've waited for the right moment." "You're talking about the old plans?" Nora asked in a low voice. Elias nodded once. Dr. Vance shook her head. "Elias, those plans were abandoned. If we start that path, there's no going back." Elias leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "We've already lost Earth," he said. "We've already lost our place in the stars. How much more do we have to lose before we stop bowing to them?" No one answered. The air in the room felt heavy. Elias could see the fear in their eyes. Fear of what it would mean to fight back. Fear of what the Union would do in return. But he could also see something else, something deeper. A quiet anger that had lived inside them all for years. A soft beep interrupted the silence. Elias turned to see a message flashing on the wall screen. It came from an old contact, someone who hadn't spoken to him in years. It was a request to meet. No names, no details, only a location deep within the lower levels of the Meridian. Elias knew the place well. It was one of the old maintenance sectors, long abandoned, or so most believed. Without a word, Elias stood and grabbed his coat. "I have somewhere to be," he said. "Stay here. Don't let anyone follow you." "Where are you going?" Nora asked. Elias paused at the door. "To see if there's still a fight left in us." The lower levels of the Meridian were dark and cold. Few dared to go down this far. The walls were rusted. The lights flickered. Old cargo containers lined the narrow paths, covered in dust and shadows. Elias moved quietly, keeping his head down. He passed workers in old jumpsuits and families huddled in makeshift shelters. These were the forgotten humans, those who lived out of sight, scraping by with whatever they could find. He had heard about them, but had never come down here himself. Seeing them now, the anger inside him grew stronger. He reached the meeting place, a small cargo bay with broken machinery scattered across the floor. A single figure stood waiting in the shadows. "Elias Ward," the man said, stepping into the dim light. Elias recognized him at once. It was Kane Mercer, a former captain of Earth's last defense fleet. Everyone believed Kane had died years ago. But here he was, alive and watching Elias with sharp, knowing eyes. "It's been a long time," Kane said. "Too long," Elias replied. Kane walked closer. "I've been listening to the Council's broadcasts. Sounds like they're about to take the last of us." Elias nodded. "Unless we stop them." Kane let out a dry laugh. "I thought you'd never say those words." "I've kept the peace for as long as I could," Elias said. "But it's not peace if it comes with a chain around our necks." Kane nodded slowly. "There's still ships, hidden in the outer sectors. Fighters, cruisers, weapons we've kept out of sight. We've been waiting for someone to light the fire." Elias looked around the dark cargo bay. He saw men and women moving in the shadows. Mechanics, pilots, soldiers. All of them human. All of them waiting. "Can we win?" Elias asked. Kane looked him in the eye. "We can make sure they never forget what happens when you push a people too far." Elias took a deep breath. He felt the weight of every life on his shoulders. But he also felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "Then we start tonight," Elias said. The next morning, Elias stood at the same window where Nora Leong had stood the night before. He stared at the cracked remains of Earth. His mind was racing with what he had seen in the lower levels. Kane Mercer was alive. The rebellion had been quietly growing all these years. The hidden fleet existed, but starting a fight now would put every human life at risk. Elias knew they needed more than ships. They needed their people to believe they were worth fighting for again. They needed to see the truth with their own eyes. With a firm breath, he turned away from the window and called for Nora. "I'm going back down," he said. She frowned. "Alone?" Elias nodded. "If I don't see it for myself, I can't ask them to follow me." Nora didn't argue. She simply handed him a small comm device. "If anything goes wrong, you call me." "I mean it." Elias gave a small nod and left the room. The lower levels of the Meridian smelled of old metal, fuel, and recycled air. Elias moved deeper into the forgotten sectors, passing workers repairing broken equipment and families living in tents made of cargo cloth. These are the humans the Council never talked about, the ones left behind after Earth's fall. Children with thin faces sat on crates, their eyes dull and tired. Mothers carried empty food containers, hoping for a delivery that never came. Men with sunken cheeks stood guard with nothing but pipes and scrap metal for weapons. Elias felt each step grow heavier. This was what they had become, refugees on a station built by those who had once promised peace. He reached the back of the sector where Kane had told him to meet. A large metal door slid open with a loud groan. Inside was a hidden hangar filled with old but functional human ships. Fighters, cargo haulers, and even a few small cruisers stood in rows. Men and women worked in silence, checking engines and loading supplies. Kane Mercer waited by one of the ships. He waved Elias over. "Welcome to what's left of our people's fight," Kane said. Elias walked through the hangar, running his hand along the side of an old fighter. It was marked with the symbol of Earth, faded but still visible. "How long have you been hiding this?" Elias asked. "Since the Orion conflicts ended," Kane replied. "We knew the Council would come for us again one day. We started gathering ships, weapons, and people. We've been waiting for a leader who could wake us up." Elias turned to face him. "I'm not here to start a war we can't win." Kane nodded slowly. "And yet, here you are." Before Elias could answer, the door opened again. A woman ran inside, her face pale with fear. "Captain Mercer, it's the outer sector. They've started rounding up workers. Families are being forced onto transport ships. No warning, no choice." Kane's jaw clenched. He turned to Elias. "They're moving faster than we thought." Elias didn't hesitate. "Take me there." The outer sector was worse than anything Elias had imagined. Armed Union soldiers, tall figures in dark armor, were forcing human families into long lines. Children cried. Mothers begged. Fathers stood powerless. Elias and Kane stayed hidden in the shadows, watching. "They're not even giving them a choice," Kane whispered. Elias felt the anger burning in his chest. His hands curled into fists. A loud voice echoed over the sector speakers. It was Vericor's voice. "All human workers are to be relocated for their safety. Compliance is required. Resistance will be punished." Elias turned to Kane. "Can you stop this?" Kane nodded. "We have teams ready, but if we hit them now, there's no turning back." Elias stared at the scene. His mind raced. He knew this could spark the very war he had spent his life trying to avoid. But looking at the faces of his people, the fear, the pain, he knew the war had already started. The Council just didn't think humans would fight it. Not yet. Elias spoke in a low, steady voice. "Do it." Kane raised his hand and signaled his teams. From the shadows, human fighters emerged. They moved quickly, silently, disabling the guards before they could raise the alarm. Elias stepped into the open, his voice ringing out. "Run! Get to cover! Move!" Panic spread through the crowd as the humans began to scatter. Union soldiers scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. The workers broke free, running toward the hidden tunnels Kane's people had prepared. Elias stood his ground as the first wave of Union soldiers turned their weapons on him. Kane's team covered him, firing back with stolen rifles. Explosions echoed through the sector. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Elias grabbed a fallen guard's weapon and joined the fight. He moved with purpose, each shot pushing back the enemy that had held his people down for so long. When the last Union soldier fell, silence returned to the sector. Elias stood in the middle of the wreckage. Around him, humans looked at him with new eyes. Not as a diplomat, not as a negotiator, but as a man who had finally taken a stand. Kin walked over, breathing hard. The council will know by morning. Elias nodded. Good. Let them know. He looked around at the people gathering. For the first time, they didn't look broken. They looked ready. Elias raised his voice so all could hear. This is only the beginning. We take back what they stole. We fight for every life they try to take from us. We fight for every human who still believes we have a future. The crowd erupted in cheers. Elias knew there was no going back now. But for the first time in his life, he didn't want to. The council chamber was more crowded than usual. Representatives from every major species had gathered again under the shining dome of the Meridian. Rumors had already begun to spread, whispers of unrest in the lower sectors, of humans breaking protocol, of violence. But no official report had reached the council floor yet. Elias Ward stood outside the chamber doors. His face was calm, but his heart was pounding. Nora Leong stood beside him, gripping a data pad tightly. Are you sure about this? She asked softly. Elias looked at her. It's already begun, Nora. They forced our hand. She lowered her eyes, but didn't argue. She knew he was right. The chamber doors opened with a deep hum. Elias walked in alone. The other human delegates remained outside by his order. This time, Elias didn't need backup. He needed the council to hear him, see him, and remember what was coming. The delegates from the other species turned their heads as he walked down the center aisle toward the speaking platform. Some sneered, some whispered to each other, but most didn't even try to hide their amusement. High Arbitrator Varek Kaur stood on the central platform, waiting. His long golden robes shimmered under the light. His cold black eyes never left Elias. When Elias reached the center, he stopped and lifted his chin. You have taken enough from us, Elias said, his voice steady and clear. We will not give you our colonies. We will not bow again. A ripple of laughter moved through the chamber. Varek raised his hand, signaling for silence. He smiled, slow and cruel. You will give us what we demand, Captain Ward, Varek replied, his voice loud enough to fill the chamber. Because without the Union, your people will starve. Without us, you have no future. Your kind should have vanished with your dead world. But we have allowed you to survive. Out of mercy, Elias stood silent for a moment, his hands tightening at his sides. Varek stepped closer, his voice dropping just enough that only Elias and the nearby delegates could hear. Do you know what they call you behind closed doors? Varek whispered. The pet race. Tamed, trained, harmless. Elias felt his blood boil. Every word cut deeper than the last. Varek leaned back and raised his voice again. We offer you shelter. We offer you food. And yet you threaten us with your tiny acts of defiance. Varek turned, addressing the entire chamber now. Perhaps it is time to remind the broken race what happens when they forget their place. The chamber burst into applause. Elias stared at Varek without blinking. His heart pounded in his ears, but he stayed silent. Not because he had no answer, but because deep down, he knew words wouldn't change anything anymore. A sudden alert flashed on Varek's wrist console. He glanced at it, then smiled wider. The first of your colonies has already fallen, Varek announced proudly. 3 hours ago, Union forces secured the outer colony of Helios. Resistance was removed. Order restored. Elias's chest tightened. He had family on Helios. Friends, leaders, workers, fighters. How many dead? Elias asked through clenched teeth. Varek tilted his head slightly, pretending to think. Thousands, I believe, he replied coldly. Perhaps tens of thousands by the time we finish counting. Something inside Elias snapped. He stepped forward, his voice like thunder. You will pay for every life you've taken, Elias said. The chamber fell silent again. Delegates stared in shock. No human had spoken with such fury in over 200 years. Varek's smile dropped. You threaten this council? He asked sharply. Elias took another step forward. He knew the cameras were watching. He knew the entire Union would hear his next words. We're done begging. We are done kneeling. From this day forward, humanity will stand on its own. You will remember this moment, Varek, Because this is the day you pushed us too far. Elias turned his back on the council and walked toward the exit. Varric shouted after him, "You will regret this, Ward. Your people will suffer for your defiance." Elias stopped at the door. He looked back over his shoulder one last time. "We already suffer," he replied. Without another word, he walked out of the chamber. The door slammed shut behind him. Nora met him in the hall, her face pale. "What happened in there?" she asked. Elias didn't stop walking. "We've crossed the line." He activated his communicator and sent a single message to Kane Mercer. "It's time. Tell the fleet to prepare." As they hurried down the hall, another alert lit up on Nora's pad. Her face went even paler. "Elias," she whispered, "they just declared martial law on all human sectors. They're locking everything down. Full military control." Elias clenched his fists. He had hoped for more time, but it was already too late. "Get the delegation ready to move," Elias ordered. "We start tonight." Elias Ward stood in front of a dusty display screen deep in the hidden hangar. He watched as the reports came in from every human colony and settlement. One by one, the Union was tightening its grip. Helios, seized. Greenix Station, seized. Varen Outpost, blockaded. The list kept growing. All across the galaxy, Union warships had begun surrounding human sectors. Food shipments were stopped. Power grids were shut down. Soldiers forced their way into homes and workplaces, arresting anyone who dared to resist. The blockade was already starving millions. Elias turned away from the screen. His face was hard, carved with anger he could no longer hide. Kane Mercer stood beside him, pulling up maps of Union-controlled space. He pointed to several points marked with red. "We have small strike teams ready," Kane said. "We've been waiting for your signal. If we hit these targets tonight, we can weaken their fleet before they lock us out completely." Elias nodded slowly. "What about the civilian transports?" he asked. "We need to get our people off the station before the Union strikes here next." Kane motioned to a second map. "We've got ships ready in the outer dock. Small, fast transports. We can move a few thousand people off the meridian before the Union notices." Elias knew it wasn't enough. There were millions of humans trapped across the galaxy. But he also knew they had to start somewhere. "Do it," Elias ordered. "Begin moving the civilians now." Kane nodded and walked off to give the order. Back in the council's upper levels, the Union's military leaders gathered in secret. Varric Kor stood at the center of the war room, watching a large holographic display. "We've already secured 3 human colonies," Varric announced. "The rest will fall soon. Begin preparing the fleet to move on the meridian itself. We will crush their spirit here, in front of the entire Union." His advisors nodded. They were certain the humans would give up after a final show of force. Meanwhile, in the hidden hangar, Elias stood before a group of human pilots, engineers, and soldiers. Men and women who have been waiting for this moment their entire lives. "We've spent 200 years in silence," Elias began, his voice steady. "We told ourselves that keeping the peace was the right thing to do, that if we waited long enough, they would treat us as equals." He paused, looking at the tired but determined faces in front of him. "They never will." A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Elias raised his voice. "We have nothing left to lose. They have already taken our home. They have already taken our pride. And now they come for what little we have left. But today they find something they never expected." He clenched his fists. "Us. Standing. Fighting. Together." The crowd began to stir. Anger turning into something else. Purpose. Elias pointed to the ships behind him. "Our fleets are small. Our weapons are old. But we have something they don't." He stepped closer to the people. "We have something they forgot about long ago. The fire to fight for what is ours. The courage to rise when they think we're beaten." He looked each of them in the eye. "Tonight, we remind them who we are." The hangar filled with the sound of human voices cheering. Hours later, the first wave of human ships launched from hidden bays across the meridian. Small fighter squadrons sped through the dark, moving toward key Union targets. Elias sat in the command seat of the Resolute, the largest human cruiser they had managed to rebuild. The ship hummed around him as the crew prepared for battle. "All units report in," Elias ordered. "Fighter teams ready," Kane replied through the comm. "Sabotage teams in position." Another voice added. Civilian transports moving, Nora Leong reported. We're getting them off the station. Elias nodded. He took a deep breath. This is it, he whispered to himself. He pressed the broadcast button to the entire fleet. Execute the plan. Make them remember. The first target was Union Relay Station 7, a communications hub controlling traffic in and out of human space. Human fighters swept in fast and low, blasting the station's outer defenses before the Union could react. Explosions lit up the blackness of space. At the same time, sabotage teams hidden inside the station took control of the power grid, shutting down Union security systems. The station fell in minutes. In another sector, human warships jumped out of hiding and attacked a Union blockade surrounding Greenock Station. The Union fleet scrambled to respond, but the humans moved faster than anyone expected. Back on the Meridian, panic spread through the Council's security forces. Reports of attacks poured in from all sides. Varek Kor stood in disbelief, watching as the humans struck over and over again. How is this possible? One of his officers shouted. They have no fleet. Varek slammed his fist on the console. They have a fleet, Varek growled, and they're using it. Elias watched as each target lit up on his display. His people were striking back. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was not running. They were standing. Kane's voice came through the comm again. The Union is calling for reinforcements. It's only a matter of time before they bring everything they've got. Elias nodded. Then we hit them here, Elias said. Prepare the strike on the Meridian itself. We end this where it started. The Resolute drifted in the shadow of a dead moon. All lights dimmed. All engines silent. From a distance, it looked like debris, lifeless and forgotten. But inside, every system was primed for war. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge, staring at the massive shape of the Meridian in the distance. The station hung like a giant metal crown in space, its towers glowing with artificial light. It was the heart of the Union's power. It was also where humanity had been humiliated for generations. And tonight it would burn. Kane Mercer stepped beside Elias, tightening the straps on his flight armor. Boarding teams are ready, Kane reported. Once we hit their outer defenses, we push straight for the council chamber. Elias nodded. He turned to Nora Leong, who stood at the comm station. Status on the civilian transports? Elias asked. They've cleared the station, Nora confirmed. The last wave just jumped out of range. They're safe for now. That was one less weight on his heart. Elias turned back to the wide display screen. The Union's defense grid surrounded the Meridian. Dozens of warships, heavy cannons, automated drones, a wall of power designed to keep enemies out. But humans weren't coming as guests anymore. They were coming as a storm. Elias opened the fleet-wide channel. This is Captain Ward. All units, prepare for the final push. At the edge of the defense grid, hidden ships powered up. Fighters, bombers, and cruisers, silent no longer. Elias raised his hand. Begin. The first wave hit the Union fleet like lightning. Human fighters streaked through the dark, weaving between the Union warships, firing precise shots that crippled engines and weapon systems. Bombers followed close behind, dropping payloads on key defense towers. Explosions bloomed like fire in the cold of space. The Union ships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. They had never expected this many human ships. They had believed the lies they had told themselves, that humanity was weak, finished, broken. Elias watched from the bridge as his people broke through the outer defenses. Kane, take your team in, Elias ordered. Strike fast. Head straight for the council. Kane saluted and left without a word. The Resolute pushed forward through the chaos. Union ships tried to close in, but human gunners fired back with deadly aim. The cruisers shook under enemy fire, but it kept moving. Structural damage on the lower decks. Nora shouted, "Hold the line." Elias barked. They couldn't stop now. Inside the Meridian, alarms blared across every level. Union soldiers rushed through the halls, trying to secure the station. But human strike teams had already breached the outer walls. Kane led the charge. His team moved through the corridors, blasting through security doors, taking down Union guards. Room by room, They cleared the path toward the council chamber. In the heart of the station, Varek Kor stood on the council floor, surrounded by armed soldiers. His face was pale with shock and rage. "How did they get in?" he shouted. "We're losing control of the station," one of his officers cried. Varek's fists clenched. "Hold them back. Seal the chamber if you must. They cannot reach me." But it was already too late. The heavy doors to the council chamber blasted open with a burst of smoke and fire. Human soldiers flooded in, weapons raised. Kane Mercer walked in at the front, followed by his team. Varek backed toward the center platform. "You dare bring war into this chamber?" Varek spat. Kane didn't answer. He simply stepped aside. Elias Ward entered the chamber, walking slowly toward Varek. His uniform was torn. His face was marked with dirt and blood, but his eyes burned with a fire Varek had never seen before. Varek's soldiers raised their weapons. Elias raised his hand, signaling his team to stop. He walked alone to the center platform. The council chamber was filled with silence. Varek sneered. "You have doomed your people, Ward," Varek hissed. "Even if you take this station, the Union will crush you." Elias stared at him, unblinking. "You already tried," Elias replied. "And we're still here." Varek took a step forward. "You are nothing. Humanity is nothing." Elias leaned in close, his voice like ice. "We were nothing to you. But you forgot one thing." Varek flinched. "You forgot that when a people have nothing left to lose, they rise." Elias turned away and raised his voice so the whole chamber could hear. "This is not just a message to the Union. This is a message to every species in the galaxy. Humanity is done kneeling. We're done begging. We are done living under your boot." He pointed toward the cameras that broadcast to every corner of the Union. "We will fight. We will build. And we will take back our place in this galaxy. We will stand, not as servants, but as equals." Elias looked directly into the lens. "From this day forward, humanity belongs to no one but itself." The chamber filled with the sound of human soldiers cheering. The Resolute circled the station as human ships pulled back. The attack was over. The message had been sent. Elias stood on the deck of the captured council chamber, looking down at Varek Kor, who sat defeated on the floor. The mighty high arbitrator, beaten not by greater weapons, but by the one thing he had never expected, human resolve. Elias knew the Union would come back. There would be more battles ahead, but the first shot had been fired, and the galaxy would never forget who fired it. For the first time in 200 years, the Meridian, the proud seat of the Galactic Union, was silent. Its mighty halls, once filled with rulers, ambassadors, and soldiers, now stood under human control. Fires still burned in the lower levels. Smoke drifted through shattered walls. The golden banners of the Union lay torn on the chamber floor. Elias Ward stood at the edge of the council platform, breathing heavily. His uniform was stained with dust, blood, and sweat. His face was marked by days without rest. His eyes, however, burned brighter than ever. Around him, human soldiers secured the last of the council guards. Others moved through the halls, checking for survivors and clearing pathways. Kane Mercer approached, carrying his rifle loosely at his side. "The station is ours," Kane reported. "For now." Elias nodded, but his face stayed serious. He knew victory today did not mean peace tomorrow. The Union would regroup. They would come back with more ships, more soldiers, more threats. "We need to move quickly," Elias said. "We hold this place for hours, not days. Get our people off this station before they surround us." Kane gave a short nod and walked off to carry out the order. Elias turned toward the live broadcast cameras still recording in the chamber. The feed was open to every planet, every ship, every species in Union space. He knew the entire galaxy was watching. He took a deep breath and stepped into view. "This message is for every species who watched us fall, every leader who stood by while we were pushed, beaten, and broken." His voice echoed through the silent chamber. "You told us we were finished. You called us weak. You took our home. You took our future." He leaned closer to the camera, his voice sharper. "But you made one mistake." He paused, letting his words settle like stone. "You thought we would never fight back. On distant planets, In spaceports and council halls, aliens of every kind watched in silence. Some in fear, some in shock, some in quiet respect. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had brought war to the very heart of the Union and stood tall. Elias straightened his shoulders. We are not broken. We are not finished. We are human. And from this day forward, we stand on our own. He ended the transmission with a final order. Remember this day, because we will. Hours later, human transports began to lift off from the Meridian. Ships packed with civilians, soldiers, and supplies sped away into open space, leaving behind the burning station. On the bridge of the Resolute, Elias watched the last of the transports vanish into hyperspace. He knew the Union's fleets were already gathering. They wouldn't be able to hold the station much longer. Kane stood beside him, waiting for his command. Are we leaving it to them? Kane asked quietly. Elias thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, he replied firmly. Set the charges. Burn it. The remaining human crews moved quickly, planting demolition charges across the station's core systems. When the last team returned to the Resolute, Kane walked up to Elias and handed him a trigger. Elias stared at the small device in his hand. His mind flashed back to all the years they had sat quietly at the edge of this very station, hoping for peace that never came. He pressed the button. The Meridian erupted in a chain of massive explosions. Fire and debris spread through space as the station broke apart, piece by piece. The Council's throne was gone, reduced to burning wreckage. The heart of the Union had been torn from stars. The crew of the Resolute watched in silence. Elias turned to them. This is not the end, he said. This is the beginning. Nora Leong stepped closer. The Union will come after us. They will, Elias agreed. But this time we meet them standing. We meet them as one people. Kane smiled faintly. They'll never forget this day. Elias nodded. No, he said. No species ever will. As the Resolute turned toward deep space and the unknown battles ahead, Elias felt no fear. The future was uncertain, but humanity had already taken the first step toward freedom. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and they would never kneel again.